Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, there's a new Armchair Historian video, and so I'm happy right now. My name is Connor. If you're new, I like to learn things. I'm from the USA, Rhode Island, New England. Let's learn. What happened to France after Napoleon? Well, Napoleon III came to power, right? Let's learn. Armchair Historian, original link, top description. Hope you guys are doing well. Let's learn.
On the picturesque Ile d'Aix, off the coast of western France, Napoleon Bonaparte...
I'm not ready. Learning mode. Go.
On the picturesque Ile d'Aix, off the coast of western France, Napoleon Bonaparte spends his final days inside his beloved country. After his defeat at Waterloo, he hoped to escape to the United States. The escape is not to be. Instead, he surrenders to the Royal Navy, which takes him to England and later to St. Helena. As the
Okay, I'm a little biased, but part of me wishes a part of Napoleon's life chapter was in the USA, but forget it. Never mind.
Emperor drifts out of view. His legacy continues to shape France for decades to come. Three monarchs will try to reconcile their monarchism with the legacies of revolution and empire. Each one of them will fail.
Until...
No history of France is truly complete without discussing its Napoleonic legacy, and no game of civilization is complete without Napoleon himself.
Guys, any promo codes if you're interested, just make sure to use the links and promo codes from Armchair Historian. Original link, top of the description, please.
That's why I'm excited that the sponsor of today's video is one of my favorite game series and the latest chapter
Settlers of
the
Catan?
award-winning Civilization franchise, Sid Meier's Civilization 7. With Civ 7, you'll build an empire to stand the test of time, achieve significant milestones in science, culture, military, and economics, and evolve your civilization through each age of history. The game features the most diverse roster of leaders yet, each with unique and customizable abilities, and you can now select leaders separately from their civilization, offering endless opportunities to create new strategies. A vast range of cultural styles reflected in architecture and unit designs brings your empire to life. For a different kind of challenge, compete online against other players in epic multi-age campaigns, or enjoy a single-age campaign that lets you experience an entire game in just one session. Civilization 7 offers a wealth of gameplay improvements that will thrill both veterans and newcomers alike. The game is available for Nintendo Switch, PS5, PS4, Xbox Series X and S, Xbox One, PC, Macs, and Linux. Civilization 7 players who link their 2K account will receive Napoleon Bonaparte's Emperor persona as an exclusive reward. And if you've played Civilization 6 with that same 2K account, you'll get Napoleon's revolutionary persona as well. Support our channel and grab your copy of Civilization 7 today by using our link in the description below. As Napoleon's defeat approached during the War of the Sixth Coalition, the victorious allies decided to restore the Bourbon dynasty to power. King Louis XVIII, the brother of the executed King Louis XVI, would rule France under a constitutional monarchy. The sixth King Louis XVIII, the brother of the executed King Louis XVI, would rule France under a constitutional monarchy. The new king was forced to balance the legacies of both pre- and post-revolutionary France. Louis XVIII was aware of the political situation in France. He realized that France could not return to the absolutist Ancien regime as it had existed before the Revolution. As Napoleon's rule collapsed, the French Senate invited him to the throne on one condition: that he accepted their constitution and rule as a constitutional monarch. However, Louis rejected the Constitution and issued his...
It reminds me a bit of, or it reminds me a lot of the transfer of power after Oliver Cromwell in England in taking back the monarchy, but with certain conditions, right? But it seems like Louis doesn't accept them.
Monarch. However, Louis rejected the Constitution and issued his own charter instead. It was very similar to the Senate's Constitution, promising many revolutionary ideas like religious tolerance and freedom of the press. However, by issuing his own constitution, Louis made it clear where true power lay in the new French kingdom. The charter was his gift to the people, not the other way around. The king was a product of the Ancien regime. Although he did not understand the new France, he pragmatically sought to find a middle way between the pre-revolutionary order and the newfound liberties. The king kept many high-ranking Napoleonic judges and officials. These men had demonstrated their competence under the empire, and Louis actively maintained the policy of unite, forget, forgive. One of the king's closest advisors declared, "Whoever served Bonaparte in the interest of France has served the king." Additionally, Louis maintained much of the Napoleonic Code, and its administrative reforms provided the monarchy with a powerful means to enforce its will. Many of the politicians who entered the legislature in 1815 were ultra-royalist conservatives who felt a sense of nostalgia for the Ancien regime. The legislature swiftly repealed revolutionary laws, which most notably included
The Ancien regime? Should I know what that is?
who felt
This is when I ask a question where I'm like a little worried, like, did I hear about this and I should know this? But I'm gonna ask it. If I should have known this, then let me know in the comments. But provide an answer, please. You guys, okay.
a sense of nostalgia for the Ancien regime. The legislature swiftly repealed revolutionary laws, which most notably included the right to divorce, and banned revolutionary symbols like the French tricolor flag. Domestic advisors and foreign representatives persuaded the king that these extreme policies alienated many in France, who were still attached to the accomplishments of the revolution. He dissolved the chamber 1 year later, and ruled mostly with more moderate royalists, known as the Doctrinaires. King Louis XVIII pursued a moderate course, but he could not fully reconcile the order of the Ancien regime with the legacies of the Revolution and Napoleon. As early as 18...
So the Ancien regime, this is too important for me to not learn. French Ancien regime. Okay, so it was a political and social system of the Kingdom of France that the revolution overthrew. So the Ancien regime is referring to the ways of life prior to the French Revolution. That makes sense.
The legacies of the Revolution and Napoleon. As early as 1814, but he could not fully reconcile the order of the Ancien regime with the legacies of the Revolution and Napoleon. As early as 1814, many in France openly undermined the Bourbons regime as Napoleonic idealization took hold of the country. Although the Bourbon Restoration embraced several revolutionary and Napoleonic changes, it resisted many more. Contrary to the Revolution, the Bourbons limited the franchise to just the wealthiest, richest men, about 1% of the people. A reactionary church propagated the values of royalist traditionalism over revolution as one of the most powerful allies of Bourbon France. The Bourbons systematically aimed to eradicate all memories of the revolutionary and Napoleonic past. They criminalized any verbal or written endorsement of Napoleon, defined the suggestion of all of the revolution.
Another thing I should know, Bourbon France. So it's just the House of Bourbon. So the Bourbons are the ruling class. The Ancien regime is talking about the French regime prior to the French Revolution, and the Bourbon is referring to the family house of people who were in charge, or who were the royalty. Okay. My fear of sounding stupid is far surpassed by me just wanting to know things. So definitely call me out on things, but if I should have known it before, I don't care. I'm just trying to learn here.
The Revolution as one of the most powerful allies of Bourbon France. The Bourbons systematically aimed to eradicate all memories of the revolutionary and Napoleonic past. They criminalized any verbal or written endorsement of Napoleon, defined the suggestion of altering the succession line to the French throne as a political crime, and imposed strict censorship laws. The government even instituted a national day of mourning to mark the execution of Louis XVI by revolutionaries.
Wow.
As atonement for France's past sins. The Bourbon search for legitimacy was thoroughly undermined by Napoleon's legacy. After Louis was restored in 1815, France was occupied by the Allies for 3 years. The occupation provoked widespread...
And thanks to mainly Metternich and Castlereagh, mainly Metternich, France didn't become too weak in order to prevent Austria and Britain from facing possible Prussian and Russian advances into a weakened Western Europe, or France, right?
By the Allies for 3 years. The occupation provoked widespread resentment in French society. A combination of economic frustration, social discontent, and patriotic pride coalesced into the figure of Napoleon. He became the image of a heroic emperor, symbolizing freedom, self-realization, the struggle of the common man, and glory. Whereas to them, the Bourbons symbolized a shameful imposed yoke of royal tyranny, while the former emperor stood for French patriotism, liberty, and even the revolution itself. Napoleon's legend reverberated throughout France. People illegally celebrated Saint Napoleon on August 15th, while they...
So it seems like now you have this awkward sort of feeling within France where you have a prior authoritarian power that you got rid of in exchange of Napoleonic France, just went to war with a lot of France and had Napoleon declare himself emperor, and then was defeated by a lot of the rest of France. And now you have some people now you have the king restored, a new king restored in the same lineage, right? And so you have a lot of, I'm sure it's a very confusing time for a lot of the French public. In that, again, I mentioned Metternich, the Austrian ambassador or statesman, because he, like, Metternichian foreign policy, correct me if I'm wrong, like if someone calls a foreign policy Metternichian, I believe it refers to the hesitation to making a defeated power too weak, especially when defeated in a coalition, because it might make some of those who were even in league with you in the coalition take advantage of that and then become too powerful in the future. And so this awkward transition from a agreed team strategy to defeat trance, I was trying to say trance in France, to defeat France has to, I won't use trance. You still have the future to deal with, and you don't want others that you might be enemies in the future with to take advantage of that stuff. That's fine. What was I even talking about when I paused? Oh yeah, the strange feeling you must have in France, and having that Metternichian foreign policy, so that you weren't completely destroyed, and now you have the previously deposed family of monarchs now back in charge, and so there's this weird feeling of, okay, you have to accept his rule, but also you don't want to forget a lot of the issues you had with him prior to Louis XVI's execution. So you want to try and level, like, okay, we want you back, but we don't want you back as in before the revolution started. I could have said that a lot quicker.
They refused to celebrated Saint Napoleon on August 15th, while they refused to celebrate the royalist holidays. Seditious objects, like images of the revolutionary rosettes, caps, and banners, popped up everywhere. Tricolor flags flew on church towers, a symbol of defiance against the hated royalist clergy. Bizarre rumors popped up about Napoleon's return. In one story, Napoleon's return was heralded by a newborn who immediately upon birth cried, "Long live the Emperor," 3 times.
True, probably true.
Songs commemorated the Napoleonic glory days, while many royalist celebrations were interrupted by cries of "Long live the Emperor."
It's not even that like his first words were that, which maybe is still unbelievable, but a little more believable, but right after birth said, "Long live the revolution," is kind of crazy.
Bourbon interrupted by cries of "Long live the Emperor." Anti-Bourbon agitation regularly turned violent. In the immediate aftermath of the Bourbon Restoration, hardline monarchists were directly opposed by ardent liberals and Republicans. High-profile assassinations, rebellions, and a foreign war only exacerbated the deep rifts that continued to exist within French society. Violence between royalists and anti-royalists started immediately after Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo. Royalist mobs, furious that the French people had so willingly abandoned King Louis after Napoleon's return, were resolved to purge the French state, who they believed to be traitors. Jacobins, Republicans, Bonapartists, and
oh my God, I don't know what Jacobins are, and then I learn what they are, and then I forget, and then I relearn, and then I forget again. I still don't understand the Jacobins, okay?
even believed to be traitors. Jacobins, Republicans, Bonapartists, and even Protestants were persecuted. Hundreds lost their lives during mob lynchings in southern France, while prominent Napoleonic generals were assassinated. Although many liberals sought prominent Napoleonic generals were assassinated.
I don't think I've heard of him.
Fascinated. Although many liberals sought a working compromise that would avoid absolutism, dictatorship, democracy, and anarchism, some were more radical. There was an armed uprising in Grenoble in 1816, a rebellion in Lyon in 1817, and even a failed assassination attempt on the Duke of Wellington, who led the Allied occupation of France.
I had no idea about that. Sorry, guys.
On the Duke of Wellington in 1817, and even a failed assassination attempt on the Duke of Wellington, who led the Allied occupation of France. 2 years later, a liberal conspiracy in the army was unveiled. Alongside these revolts, secret societies dedicated to liberalism sprung up all over Europe. The conservative European order grew increasingly paranoid that these liberals were in cahoots with other liberals throughout Europe, and that the liberal network was part of a massive conspiracy to overthrow their order.
So kind of like a early 19th century Red Scare, but liberal scare.
Bourbon France.
It's crazy how people are fascinating.
Alongside the other powers of the Congress of Vienna, paranoidly tried to suppress these tendencies through rigorous surveillance and guilt by association. In 1820, a political event shocked France. The Duc de Berry, the king's cousin, was assassinated by a Bonapartist. Many Napoleonic and liberal agitators celebrated and called for the assassination of the king as well. Politically, however, the assassination had caused a backlash. The liberals were swept out of power and replaced by hardline ultra-royalists. They used the next year to quickly consolidate political control over France, and thanks to political manipulation, they soon controlled all but 17 of the 428 seats in the French legislature. These ultra-royalists presided over an invasion of Spain, known as the Expedition of the 100,000 Sons of St. Louis. France intervened to support the Spanish king, Ferdinand VII, in his struggle against his liberal legislature. Aside from resistance by the Spanish liberals, the government also faced significant domestic opposition. French liberals met the armies at the border, waving the tricolor flag and singing the Marseillaise, urging soldiers not to cross. Poets declared solidarity with the Spanish liberals, and French liberals urged soldiers to mutiny. In the end, however, the conservatives were victorious.
Oh, wow.
After the Battle of Trocadero, Spanish liberalism was crushed, and the ultra-royalists claimed a great propaganda victory for their cause. Nonetheless, their hold over France remained ever strenuous. Louis XVIII died in 1824. His brother, Charles X, succeeded him. In contrast to his brother, Charles did not pursue moderate policies. Rather, his contempt for French liberalism and the legacy of the Revolution and Napoleon led to a political crisis and, ultimately, a second French Revolution. Already well before his coronation, Charles maintained a clear ultra agenda. Together with his prime minister, Joseph de Villela, Charles' policies pushed a series of reforms that seemingly brought France back to the days of the Ancien Regime. Suffrage was further restricted to only the ultra-royalists. The émigrés, people who fled the country during the Revolution, received financial compensation for the trouble the Revolution caused them. Many saw these people as traitors to France for their opposition to the Revolution.
This is the scary thing. Maybe not scary. Keep emotions out of it. This is a interesting thing about how political or governing or regimes or people in power, not people in power. How the political regimes tend to change. Sometimes they do go from, like, say, the American Revolution, I guess could be an example of from monarchical to just, they go from monarchical and then sway through revolution to democracy and republicanism, and then they stay that way until today. But a lot of the time, this as an example, it seems, let me know if I'm wrong, guys, no expert. A lot of the times it goes back and forth like a pendulum. It's like, if you get enough people in power and there's a successful revolution, then it goes one way. And then they're defeated by others, and then it goes another way. And then this way, then this way, until it kind of just sticks in the middle. Not even sticks in the middle, just sticks in one way or the other, rather than just a one side to other side, and then stick. Damn, that was horrible. I hope you understand. Sometimes it can happen like the American Revolution happened, where it was one way, and then it swayed the other way, and then stuck for centuries. And then it can happen in this way, where over decades, it can go back and forth between liberalism and conservatism or monarchicalism. Monarchism? Man, I'm sorry, but I hope you get my point.
Many saw these people as traitors to France for their opposition to the revolution. The French bourgeoisie denounced the law as a bounty to the emigrants for their treason to the revolution. The greatest social opposition to Charles' regime stemmed from his religious policies. Throughout the 1820s, the church gained enormous influence. In schools and universities, liberal and Enlightenment thought was banned in favor of conservative Catholic education. In 1825, a law that made blasphemy and sacrilege punishable by death further riled public sentiment against Charles, and even sent some ultra-conservatives reeled from the law's severity. Thanks to concerted liberal efforts, Villela lost the 1827 election, and the French legislature was no longer monopolized by the ultra-royalists. The liberals were increasingly fearful of Charles' uncompromised hatred of the revolution, and of attempts to undermine the rights of Parliament. These fears were justified when Charles appointed a new ministry led by an ultra-royalist, the Prince du Polignac. In response, a majority of deputies quickly passed a motion of no confidence in Polignac. The liberals wanted to force Charles to choose ministers acceptable to them, and elections in July of 1830 made it clear that the electorate shared their view. Charles, however, saw the liberal threat as a prelude to revolution. He quickly invoked emergency powers and issued a series of ordinances that suspended freedom of the press, further limited the vote, and dissolved the legislature.
That's ironic, because if you had seen some, prior to the beginning of the French Revolution in the 1790s, was there some tampering down of authoritarian rules or monarchical top-down rules that led to it? Because this seems like something that would increase the likelihood of revolution rather than decrease.
Suspended freedom of the press, further limited the vote, and dissolved the legislature. Although the 1830 revolution was also caused by economic and financial upheaval, the social reverberations of the 1789 revolution and Napoleon were instrumental in the political crisis. To many liberals, Charles had abandoned the Constitution, and with it, legal government. The revolutionaries were driven by patriotic, Republican, Napoleonic, and anti-clerical sentiments, all directed against Charles X and his out-of-touch policies. The king had forced a confrontation between the legacy of the Ancien Regime and that of the Constitution, with its revolutionary elements. Within just 3 days, forced a confrontation between the legacy elements. Within just 3 days, the Constitution achieved a resounding victory. After Charles abdicated, the liberals in the French Parliament proclaimed his cousin, Louis Philippe, the new king of the French. Although the new king came to power by riding on a wave of liberalism, he too would ultimately also fail to reconcile his monarchism with the legacy of revolution and empire.
Is this where 1848 comes into play?
At first, the new monarchy seemed to represent the final victory of the people over the Ancien Regime, a champion of constitutional liberty at home and abroad. Louis Philippe, the so-called citizen king, sought to consolidate the legacy of the Ancien Regime, the Revolution, and the Napoleonic era into one patriotic French history.
Okay.
For the new king, French history should inspire pride and unity in its
Makes
people
sense.
rather than division. The wonders of the Revolution and the Empire were on full display in the Palace of Versailles, now turned into a popular museum. After months of negotiation with Britain, Napoleon's ashes returned to France, where they were meant to serve as a...
Man, what I would give to go to a museum, a historical museum in the early 1800s. What I would give to go to any historical museum far in the past, I would do anything. Just to see, because there's so much history from them and now, from then and them and now, that our museums are full of, right? I would love for a museum to be created nowadays where, not to replace current day museums, but just one or a few museums that portray history as people in our history would have viewed it. I would love that. Like many of those, like a museum to show how people in the early 1820s would have saw a museum, or people in the 300s would have saw a museum. I think that'd be really cool.
Unifying symbol of French greatness under the stable rule of the House of Orleans. However, the legacy of the Revolution and Napoleon also continued to inspire opposition to Louis Philippe's rule. As 1848 approached, Republican desires, rooted in 1789, once more flared up. Poor urban workers complained about their living conditions, and the petite bourgeoisie demanded an expansion to the still very narrowly restricted right to vote. Ultimately, these underlying tensions exploded in yet another revolution, one that would lead to the creation of a second republic, one in which another Napoleon would rise to power in a popular landslide.
You know, it seems like a lot of the social revolutions of the mid and latter second half of the 1800s of the 19th century were a growth of what the French Revolution was. You know, like it seems like the social revolutions of the mid 1800s and latter 1800s are a continuation of people outcrying the unfairness of society. And as much as I think people might have maybe gone overboard in declaring what a new society should be, and that we saw in the early 1900s how going too far the other way in terms of just pure, in my opinion, just kind of pure worker run stuff can have its own problems. But I think this is all a result of a constant gaining of bearings between autocratic, unfair, monarchical rule towards a more reasonable and fair bottom-up rule, right? I'm not saying that, and I think that, again, this pendulum, I feel like history is not this. And by this, I mean like the progress towards, I would say, more civilized and fair society is not this. It's sort of like it still goes up over time, you know? It's not full up, down, but it is like up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Like it kind of goes like that, you know what I mean? Rather than just pure linear.
In large part thanks to the sentiments of national pride, power, and public order that the Bonaparte name came to carry.
That was fantastic. Great video. I said a lot during the video, so I don't have much to say as a conclusion. I would appreciate any comments down below, any answers to my questions, anything you guys want to say. You're always great with that. Love y'all, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time. We'll keep on learning. Bye, guys.